So much for being with us. If you are a guest this morning, thank you so much for joining us here at Long Hill. If you're watching online, again, thank you for taking the time just to be with us. I once again want to wish those of you who are mothers, and there's a few first-time mothers in the room, just a very happy Mother's Day. If you have raised kids, if you've stood in the gap, if you've done that in less than perfect circumstances, know that we want to honor you, but God, more importantly, He sees you today. And I know this is also a complicated day for some of us, because for some of us, this is the first Mother's Day where we have a mother who's not here, a mother who has passed on. And so we're left to contend with just all of those feelings, that mixed feeling of memories and also a sense of loss. And for some of you as well, you have a mother who maybe was not the perfect mother. And so you're left with a complicated legacy. You're left with feelings. You're left with just trying to grapple, as other people seem like they're celebrating, with all of the things that you're carrying around in your life. And so I just want to remind you today, wherever you find yourself in that whole spectrum, the grace of God, the mercy of God, the peace of God, and the very Spirit of God is with you in that place, wherever you are. We have been, and we started last week, a series in the Old Testament book of Joshua, which is very cleverly named Joshua. And it is really this series about the story that's after the story. It's not the one that there's movies made about. There was this other story about a character named Moses and just the leaving Egypt, going to the Promised Land. There's stories that we kind of know, but this is the story after that. And really the whole idea behind this is this. Sometimes in faith, sometimes in life, you can't go back, but you don't know how to go forward. All you have is a promise, you have a call, and you have a choice in the midst of all that. How many of you have a very close relationship with your snooze button? Let's be honest, some of you you like that thing a lot. You push it often. This morning I woke up a couple times and it's on my phone, and many of us have it on their phone. And I think there's like a little X where you can turn it off, and there's a little button that says ZZZZZZZ on it. And I hit that a couple times. When I was in high school, I was able, in the midst of being half awake, to perform complex mathematical calculations in my head. I think mine was 7 minutes, and I could multiply and figure out how many of those I could work in until I actually had to get up and then rush my way through getting out the door and getting to school. And you just know with the snooze button that it's a choice in the moment, because you push it, and doesn't it feel so good to push that thing? Yeah. It feels so good. What I actually do sometimes is I'm getting free in this moment. I listen to really boring historical documentary YouTube videos. And sometimes I'll throw one of those on because it puts me right back to sleep. And then the snooze button will interrupt it again. But the thing you know about this is it doesn't delay the inevitable. It delays it, but it doesn't remove the inevitable. There's this inevitable thing that at some point you have to get up. And one of the things I'm trying to teach my kids is doing that, adding those extra minutes, actually doesn't make you feel better. 7 more minutes of sleep is not going to change your day. So you're going to be like, I was going to have a bad day where I was tired, but I got that 7 minutes of extra sleep, and it made all the difference in the world. And so at some point you have to get up, you have to go get moving, and you have to go. And today's message, today as we look into the second half of chapter 1 of the book of Joshua, this is an unavoidable get up and go kind of message. You just can't work your way around it. It's a get up and go story. Last week, we found ourselves where the people of God, who are now led by this character named Joshua, who is kind of the advisor or the assistant to a much more famous leader named Moses, they are getting towards the end of their time wandering in the wilderness. They'd been wandering in the wilderness. They'd left Egypt, but now they'd been in the wilderness for about 40 years. And they're getting to the end of that time, and they're going to cross over into a place that had been promised to them long before, called the Promised Land. Last week we talked about the fact that as they made that crossing the second river that they'd crossed, the second body of water, it wasn't an easy thing, it was a difficult thing. And when they got into the land, it wasn't just like it was open and welcoming. They had to go fight a bunch of people. There were more battles up ahead. And so Joshua is commissioned to be a leader, and he starts to step into that role. The Spirit of God literally says, "Moses, my servant, is dead." And it was something they all knew, but it was a reminder that a new moment, a new season for Joshua had come. But now, today, we get into the get up and go part of the story. And we leave off with the last verse that we heard last week, which was God's reminder of a couple things that Joshua and the people had to be. Choices they had to make, things they had to become, not because they felt like doing it, but because it was necessary for the journey. And so in verse 9, God says this, he says, "Have I not commanded you?" Not have I suggested to you, have I commanded you, be strong and courageous, do not be afraid, do not be discouraged. Why can they not be afraid and not be discouraged? Because the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And so Joshua ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp and tell the people, get your provisions ready. 3 days from now, you will cross the Jordan, which is the river, to go in and take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving you for your own. And so Joshua finally begins to take charge. This had to be one of those moments that felt incredibly insecure and daunting for him, because he's now he's not only grappling with the idea of being the leader of the people, now he's in the reality of it. Some of you've had a season like that in your life where there was something out in front of you. It was an opportunity, or maybe it was a change in the station of your life, and the idea of it seemed so appealing, but then the reality of it seemed kind of daunting. I have 2 pictures on my phone. They're selfies. They are selfies in the moment before I was to meet my children in the hospital. You know, my wife gave birth by C-section twice, and they kind of keep you out, and then they bring you in, and you dress up in all of this crazy stuff. You have like a robe, and you have a mask, and you have a thing on your head. And so I have these 2 really crazy-looking pictures of me in all this stuff moments before I was to meet my 2 children. And my second son was born very early, and so that was a very, almost a fearful, anxious experience. But I remember my first son, Christopher. I remember the reality, the understanding, the knowledge that this was a line between one part of my life and the next part of my life. This was a line where everything after it was going to be different. Everything was never going to be the same again. And I knew that there would be a lot of blessing and joy, and there are. But I also knew that there was going to be sacrifice. There's going to be a whole lot of times, and you parents can relate to this, where you just had no idea what to do. It seemed so clear before you actually were there. Isn't it amazing how the people who aren't parents are like, my kid will never watch screens. And then you get some kids, and you're like, we need to buy sanity. Here's YouTube Kids, go for it. Here's Blippi. Here's Cocomelon. There's something about Cocomelon that, like my younger son, I think they're building an army of toddlers who at some point they're going to give the command, and the toddler army is going to rise up and cross all over the earth and take charge. But there's just these places in our lives where there's a line, where there's the before, there's the after. There's the choice we have to step up into the moment, or just to let the moment carry us along. This is one of those moments for Joshua. And so we've all been given a position this morning in life. But my question to you is, have you taken possession of your position? Have you stood in it? Have you owned it? Have you embraced it? And there's not a verse between verses 9 and 10 and 11. God says to Joshua, he says, be strong and courageous, and then Joshua has to stand up in that moment. Wouldn't it be great if there was a verse in between that said something like this? So God explained exactly what he was going to do, and once everything felt right, Joshua got up and did it. That I would love if that verse was there, and so would you. And so there's things that God is asking you to do. And wouldn't it be great if the things God was asking us to do seemed easy? I think there's a couple things that hold us back from that. There's many things, but there's a couple I want to talk about. There's this paralyzing perfectionism that we kind of put out in front of God. It's like, if the exact timing seems like everything lines up, then I'll do it. If I feel good about it, then I'll do it. We have this idea that God's perfect plan means that we have to do it perfectly. And God's perfect plan may be perfect. We will never do it perfectly. It will never feel right. You will mess things up. I will mess things up. It's not an excuse. It's inevitable. But I think there's something else too, and maybe some of you can relate this in the room if you're watching online. It's the sense of shame that we carry from past failures. It's the things that we carry along in the past with us that kind of define us, that want to speak condemnation over us. Give me 1 second. Oh, that's better. I think we're there. It's the worst when someone sneezes on a microphone. Got it out. It's right there. It's right there. It's like, hi, I'm here. I'm going to make you want to sneeze. I'll try to turn the mic off when I have to do that. But we carry this sense of shame from past failures, where it's like there's this thing that happened back there, and maybe we didn't get it right, or maybe we blew it. All right, I'm back. But we can't let that condemn us. Condemnation is not from the Lord. Conviction may be, but condemnation is not. And if you're feeling a sense of condemnation this morning, if you're feeling a sense of, there's this thing in front of you, but remember what happened back there, that's not from God. He may confront you with parts of yourself that you need to see and that you need to own, and with His grace, you need to step up and step away from, but condemnation will never come from the Lord. But so we have to step up into things, and Joshua had to step up into some things, but the people had to do something as well. So Joshua gave these orders, and he said, you have to get ready. You have to get ready for this step that you have to take. And there's always this tension with God. There's this tension that says, I'm with you. You can rest in who I am, but also get up and do something. So there's this resting part that we do where we are defined by God's love. We're defined by His grace. We're defined by His power. But then we can't just stay there. We actually have to then go do something. So this happens for Joshua, and it happens for the people. And in the background of Joshua's mind had to be the shadow of Moses, the one who had led them out of Egypt, led them through the promised land. There were some times where it made sense. There were some times where it didn't. But he had this incredible legacy that now Joshua had to feel like was shadowing over him, and that all the people knew about. Some of you today, you feel like there's this shadow over you. There's something from your past. There's someone else, whether it's good or bad, that is cast over you that's defining you. And God is calling you up even in the midst of that. And I love how in the passage, Joshua gets affirmation from the people. We're about to see this in just a moment. But it's only after God has affirmed him first. Oftentimes, we look for affirmation from others around us to then go do what God has asked us to do. This comes from God first, and then it trickles down, and people say, yeah, I can see that. I can see where God might be leading you. Sometimes you have to do it in spite of that, when you don't get that, when you don't feel that. But if it comes from God, we will not get our identity, we will not get our security from the other people who are around us. Listen to how the passage goes on in verse 12. But to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, that's what you came to church to hear about, was the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. We'll talk a little more about them later. Joshua said, remember the command that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you after he said, listen to this crazy verse, the Lord your God will give you rest by giving you this land. That sounds great. We're going to get a thing, and we're going to finally be able to take a deep breath. We're not going to be marching anymore. We're not going to be on the move anymore. We'll finally have a place that we can call home. But remember how this happens. There's a battle that has to happen first. Your wives, your children, and your livestock may stay in the land that Moses gave you east of the Jordan, but all your fighting men ready for battle must cross over ahead of your fellow Israelites. So the idea here is these 3 tribes, or 2.5 tribes, if we're going to be very specific about it, they had a land that was not on the same side of the river as everybody else. But what they were asked to do, what Joshua asked them to do, is he says, you need to go across the river and fight for something that is ultimately not going to be yours. Because your land is over here. It's in a different spot. This isn't just about what they get. This is something greater than that. Because this isn't about them. There may be something in your life. There may be something up ahead of you. Certainly on a day like this, when we celebrate mothers and we celebrate parents and we remind ourselves that children are part of our lives, there's a lot of things we fight for that are not for us, that we do not personally benefit from. And it is hard sometimes to go in a direction, to step up into something that God has called us to do, when we don't know how it helps us, when we don't know the benefit that we get from doing it. When it's about us, it involves comfort. When it's about others, it involves cost. So the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, they own their role, but they don't do it for themselves. They do it on behalf of others. And so Joshua gives them some commands. He says, you are to help them until the Lord gives them rest for you, and until they too have taken possession of the land the Lord your God is giving them. After that, you may go back and occupy your own land, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you east of the Jordan towards the sunrise. And then they answered Joshua, whatever you have commanded us, we will do, and wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we fully obeyed Moses, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your word and does not obey it, whatever you may command them will be put to death. And there's yet another reminder here, only be strong and courageous. And this is about the 3rd time this strong and courageous phrase is repeated in the chapter. There's 3 times where it says the same thing. And this brings us to a very important concept as we look ahead in our lives to the things where God has called us to get up and get moving and step up into. Surround yourself with people who will echo what God has already said. Surround yourself with people who will remind you of what is true. Because in this world, there are many people, there are many voices, there are many places, there are many sources. It's more than it's ever been before who want to tell you things. And some of those things are good things. But we have to always remember what God has already said to us. This does not mean, by the way, get yourself a sounding board that affirms what you already think. This doesn't mean go find some people who are like, yeah, you're right. Absolutely. You have nailed it. You have the corner on truth. What I'm saying with this and what I think we see here is this reminder that there are people who echo what God has already said. And what God already says is something that gives us hope and it gives us a future and it's something that motivates us onward, but it is also incredibly costly, it is risky, and it's not something that we automatically feel like doing, especially on the days where it seems like there's so much arrayed against us. You know, one of the things, I try very hard to do this, I'm still growing this, I'm learning in this, is to surround myself with people who love me, who care about the things I care about, but are also not afraid to tell the truth. So people who have my best interests in mind, people who have the things that I have been called to in my life, my kids, my family, this place, the best interests of that in mind, but who are also not afraid to tell me the truth. And that is something, if you hear this today, surround yourself with those same kinds of people. It will bring you low at points. It will humble you at points, and that's the right thing. That's why it needs to happen. It's not to tear you apart. It's not to tear you down, but it's to keep you centered in what is true and what God has already said. And there's something else that's very curious in this chapter. The Lord your God will give you rest, but he'll do it by giving you this land. But in order to do that, you have to go fight. Look at verse 14. It says, fighting ready for battle. 16, it says, taking possession of the land. That sounds so wonderful, but it's a battle. It's a battle, as we'll see in the next chapters, that they don't always win because they don't understand how it all works. And so when we think of the word rest, it's actually what it says here. It's peace, it's home, it's stopping, it's all of the things that we would define rest as. But how we get there is not how we think we get there. Because rest, I believe this, it comes as a result of action, not just relaxation. Y'all should take a nap. Naps are great. But if you want to find peace in your life, it won't come from when you withdraw from everything. Whether the roles God has called you to, the calling he's placed on your life, you will not find peace there, but you will find peace if you step into the places that God has called you to take possession of. Think about if rest came from inaction. If it just came from saying, you know what, I just want to relax. The people would still be on the other side of the river. They never would have crossed into the promised land because it's a lot of work and it's a lot of uncertainty. So they'd still be hanging out in some way in the wilderness. And some of you feel like you're in a wilderness today. And I want to say this very carefully because our lives are complicated. But maybe the reason it feels like that is because God has already said something and you haven't stepped in yet to what God has already said. And peace isn't here. Peace is across the river. So finding rest in the Lord, it's not passive. Sometimes it's a battle. Sometimes it's an ongoing battle. Sometimes it's a fight. Sometimes it's a day-by-day discipline of not pushing the snooze button and kicking it down the road, but getting up and facing with the power of the Lord, with the Spirit of the Lord, with the hope that God gives us, facing what he's called us to do. Name a great move of God that came from comfort. Name a great move of God that came from comfort. I'll wait. Name a great move of God that came from comfort. You know, comfort, it's great when it's part of your life. What I'm not saying is, you know what? You need to be miserable all the time. You need to never rest. That is not what the scriptures say. In fact, sometimes in our culture, this is something we get wrong. We're workaholics. You know, we don't stop short of all that we could do so that God could be who he is. But comfort's great when it's part of your life. It's unhealthy when it's your life. It's great when it's part. It's unhealthy when it's everything. You know, when I was in college, I had this pillow. I may have told this story before. I got this pillow, and it was a really comfortable pillow. I never washed it. for like years. Like, it got to the point where my pillow could have gotten up and gone to my classes for me. And it was just something that was comfortable, but it was kind of smelly, and it was a little bit disgusting, and it was unhealthy. You know, one of the moves I made when I graduated was I took it to the dumpster and I threw it away. So something that was very comfortable for me actually started to be repulsive to anybody else. And it actually would have, I imagine, it would have become at some point unhealthy for me. I don't think there were any critters living in there, but I couldn't tell you for sure. So comfort's great when it's part of your life. It's unhealthy when it's your life. So this whole passage, this whole story has one point to it. It is a call to be bold. It's a call to be bold, to step across the lines in your life where you know it's one way over here, but once you cross over the line, it will be this way, and you can never go back. And some of those are very hopeful lines, like my story about becoming a father for the first time. And some of those are very difficult because it requires us to grieve. It requires us to mourn. And sometimes it requires us to let go of things that were in the last season so we can embrace the next one. And that's really hard. That's really complicated. It's really difficult. But as we do it, remember what is said 3 times in this chapter. Be strong and courageous. Why? Because the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. When you face the difficulty, when you cross the river, when you step up and you step out, the Lord your God will be with you. That's not a suggestion. That's not, like one of those things where you have a friend who's like, I might come over, and they're never going to. I'll give you a call, and they never do. This is something that God promises over and over again, and if we will walk in his will, if we will walk in his way, if we'll allow our affirmation to be found in him, then he will be with us wherever we go. So the question is not, did God speak? I think a better question is, are you going to go and do something with what God has said? But not just dash out the door and just move into some kind of rash action. There's some of us in this room who just like to go do stuff. And what that actually is at times, I'll just speak for myself, it's an attempt to remain in control. It's like I have to do something uncomfortable or difficult, or I have to step into something, so I'm just going to preempt it and go do it now so I don't feel that uncertainty of the gap between what God has called me to do and the way that God wants to work it out in my life. Remember what it says in this passage. There's this call, but Joshua says to the people, he says, prepare and get ready because you're going now? No, in 3 days. You are to get up, you are to cross the river, and you are to take possession of the promised land. You can get ready, but you're never going to feel ready. There's 24 chapters in this book. We're in chapter 1. A bunch of the book is like a lot of names and regulations and people who are going to move here and move there, but there's a lot of battles that end up being fought, and this is the beginning of the journey. And it's very easy for us sometimes to just kind of use God to justify the thing we already want. Really, often God is calling us to something different, and that's the place where we'll find peace, we'll find rest, even if it's uncomfortable getting there, and even if it's not right away. So as we close, I have one question for you. Then you can go to brunch. What is the thing that God has already told you to do that you're still waiting to feel ready for? What's the thing that God has already told you to do? You kind of just know it already. And maybe you've pushed it off, you've rationalized it, you've justified it, you've said that can't be for me, it can't be me because look at me, there's this shadow that's cast over me, and I'm nothing like the people that I think do this well. But what's the thing that God has already told you to do that you're still waiting to feel ready for? You don't need more clarity, you need more courage. You don't need more information, you need obedience. You don't need to feel stronger because your strength doesn't come from you, it comes from him. And because of that, you can get up and move. And remember, the promise of God, it's not, when you're ready, when you feel it, I'll go with you. It's I'll be with you wherever you go. And so get up, pack your things, get your heart ready, and take the first step, not because it's easy, but because he's faithful. Not because it's the simple thing, because it's not. There's a line somewhere that you're going to cross, and it feels heavy, it feels weighty, it feels significant, but God is faithful across those kind of lines. Be strong and be courageous, not because you're fearless, but because you're not alone. Would you pray with me? God, some of us are really motivated by these get up and go kinds of messages. We're like, I'm ready to go do it. I've decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. And some of us, we're in this room and it just feels heavy. It feels tired. We feel things in our lives. There's things in front of us that just are not, they're not very motivating or inspiring that we have to face. But I pray that as we both groups consider those things together, that we'd be reminded that we can be strong, we can be courageous. We don't have to be afraid. Not because we somehow can just kind of concentrate and work ourselves up and pull ourselves up and suddenly feel those things, but because of who you are, because of what you've done, because of your faithfulness in the past, your faithfulness in the present, and your faithfulness in the future. Wherever we go. I pray that whatever that looks like for us, you would remind us of your presence, of your strength. But then, that we wouldn't push that snooze button anymore. We'd get up, we'd face the day, and know that we don't face it alone because you're with us. And the story you still have to write is out ahead. It's across the line. It's in the next season that feels so profound and so different. But you were with us in the past. You're with us now. And in those places, you'll be with us too. We thank you for this truth. Would it become real to us today? We pray these things in Jesus' name.